Hi, Canucks Capsuleers. Welcome to the Chronicles of New Eden. I'm Dan Nord, the co-CEO of Story in Advance, an alliance in Wormhole and NoSec. I'm also the co-host of the Canuck Capsuleers Chronicle. It's a weekly show about Eve's news every Tuesday at 2015 Eastern Time Zone. Today is the first episode about the Minmatar. We talked a bit about them in the first episode, describing them as a tribal republic of warrior, poets, and artisans, fiercely proud and individualistic. We also talk about them in the history of the Amarr Empire, where the Amarr enslaved them. They have managed to free themselves after a fight between the Amarr and the Jove. If you want to hear what happened from the view of the Amarr, I suggest you to listen to the second episode named The Amarr Empire History. I'm gonna put the link in the description below. Are you ready to dive into this episode with me? Oh, and keep in mind that I'm doing that podcast to get better in English, so I'm sorry in advance. Minmatar Republic. Of the four major races of New Eden, none has endured more tragedy and suffering than the Minmatar. Once part of thriving and technological capable tribal civilization, billions of Materi were enslaved by the Amarr Empire for more than 700 years, until a mass rebellion freed most, but not all, of those held of servitude. Initially modeling its recovery after Galante Federation notions of democracy, the Minmatar Republic was born through the cooperation of four major tribes. The Minmatar are the most numerous of all the races in New Eden, but their vast numbers are dispersed widely and divided into many factions. While the Minmatar Republic is the official state, only a quarter of all Minmatar currently alive are part of it. A very large portion, almost a third, remain enslaved within the huge Amarr Empire, while a fifth reside within the Galante Federation, creating a powerful political bloc that contributes in no small part to the constant state of tension between Galante and Amarr. The remainder, who are not part of any formal organization, live as freemen throughout the world. Many are itinerant laborers roaming from one system to another in search of work. A fair number make their living on the darker side of the law, acting as pirates, smugglers, and peddlers in all kinds of illegal goods. It is worth noting that many of the larger criminal groups in New Eden are run by people of Minmatar heritage. The free Minmatar peoples are resilient, ingenious, and hardworking. Perhaps most of all they are proud, and many of them believe that democracy, though it served them well at first, will never restore what was taken from them by the Amarr Empire. As all 7 tribes of Mara have united again and found a new sense of their identity in the Amparian age, the development of the Minmatar Republic has swung away from guarantee ideas of unadulterated democracy. The Minmatar have created a form of government truly reflective of their historical tribal culture. Almost invariably, they remain deeply attached to their enslaved kindred and will go to extraordinary lengths to recover them. The Minmatar will forever resent the Amarr and yearn for the days before the Empire's accursed ships ever reached their home port. History, origin. In AD 8017, the Terran explorers of the CMS-17 system were delighted to discover two temperate planets in the circumstellar habitable zone. And even more so when they found that one of these worlds, the fourth planet from the Sun, was blessed with particularly hospitable conditions. News of these discoveries made the CMS-17 system a prime target for colonization, and it was soon renamed Tator, with the fourth planet becoming known as Mator. Mator was quickly colonized by numerous expeditions attracted by the prospect of settling a world that would require no terraforming, and very likely support self-sustaining colonies. Indeed, when the Eve Gate closed, most of the settlement on Minmatar survived and even prospered once they recovered from the initial crisis. Over the centuries, these colonies lost their advanced technologies, as a lack of supply and the loss of knowledge led to an inevitable breakdown. The Minmatar Empire. Over the next 10,000 years, several distinct civilizations developed on Matar and gradually became aware of one another. As technological advance allowed for regular trade, certain legends and fragmentary history indicate that international warfare between the tribe and even between clans of the same tribe was commonplace in the early period of the war. In the end, perhaps promoted by a combination of trade and spread of mystic belief system, the tribes understood that cooperation was a far better way than war. After a general peace between the tribe was established in AD 20,374, a global council developed and the Minmatar eventually unified in a loose empire. Minmatar technology developed at a respectable pace in this period, and a little over a millennium later, they made their way into space. As well as colonization much of the Tator system, the Minmatar Empire was able to settle colonies on a number of planets and moons in several local systems, usually depending on ancient stargates, but initially using ships accelerated to near light speed. The Day of Darkness. Despite having made great strides in space technology, the Minmatar Empire did not manage to expand very far or develop a large space fleet before its fateful first encounter with another empire, the Amarr Empire, a technocratic state driven by its religion to reclaim the stars and all living around them. The Amarr Empire had managed to reverse engineer Stargate technology and occupy a great swath of star systems. In AD 22,355, after detecting the Minmatar Empire's presence and evaluating its capabilities, the Amarr sent a large fleet to the Tator system intent on a grim purpose. The day the Amarr fleet entered the Tator system, a great storm blew up over the largest continent of the planet Matter. The storm was incredibly destructive and turned the skies dark, an ill omen that would be remembered as the herald of our fleet. The core of the fleet was made up of 6 giant slaver vessels, each escorted by many heavily armed warships. Each of these slaver vessels made for a different planet, and once in orbit proceed to land troops and round up large numbers of people. The escorting warships took pains to destroy every Minmatar spaceship, satellite, and station they encountered. surface installations of military or space industrial van were systematically bombarded. The Minmatar armed force tried bravely to resist but were crushed by the superior arms and technology of the Amarr slavers. On that day, the Amarr took hundreds of millions of slaves, depopulating most of the colony world. They invaded and wreaked havoc on Massala. The day itself, by association with the Black Storm it began with, and the underlying the horror of the deeds the Amarr carried out, became known as the Day of Darkness. Conquest and occupation. For a little over a century after their first incursion, the Amarr continued to make slave raids on the Minmatar Empire. In this period, for all practical purposes, the Minmatar Empire ceased to exist, as the Minmatar colonies were cut off from Matar and eventually left empty and ruined. Matar itself entered a period of chaos, as the global infrastructure that has been created was wrecked by successive slave raids. Finally, in AD 22,480, Emperor Damius III ordered the conquest and occupation of Matar. The entire Minmatar race was to be subjugated and enslaved. As with each time they had been raided, the Minmatar attempted to resist, but no power left to them could stop the Amarr from conquering their world. With the exception of a few mountain strongholds and secret resistance cells, the Amarr quite easily achieved a global domination of Matar. Every remaining Minmatar colony world was likely invaded and placed under the rule of Amarr holders. For the next 700 years or so, the Matar lived under Amarr occupation and enslavement. Many hundreds of millions of Matar were shipped across the Amarr Empire as slaves. The Amarr always crushed was rebellions occur with utter ruthlessness and brutality. The uprising of the Star Manir tribe some 450 years after their conquest was deemed so serious that the tribe was ordered annihilated by orbital bombardment. Later events showed that the genocide, while it killed the vast majority of the once largest tribe of Minmatar, was not complete. However, so far as anyone at this time was concerned, the Star Manir has been destroyed, and inevitably the story and its symbols, notably that of the Kumak, spread among the Minmatar. From that time on, if they had not known it before, the Minmatar knew that one day they must all fight to be free of their overlords. The Great Rebellion. A little over 250 years after the annihilation of the Stark Manir, the four great star empires of the Amarr, Caldari, Galante, and Jove had come into contact with one another. The Jove had limited their contact with the other, and while it was clear they were technologically advanced, their true capabilities and motives were a mystery to the other nations. The Galante Federation and the Caldari State, for their part, were still at war, but their conflict had bogged down into a stalemate. The Galante, libertarians by instinct and prone to intervention, had become aware of the plight of the Minmatar and were affected by it. Over the preceding centuries, the Minmatar resistance had organized itself and even achieved the capability to mount raids on Amarrian installations. The Galante Federation secretly aided this resistance in every way it could. Against this background, the Amarr Empire was feeling increasingly uneasy at the presence of several rival powers along its borders. As so often before, the Amarr Empire decided that they must act accordingly to their doctrine of reclaiming, and chose the Jove Empire for a demonstration of Amarrian might. The Amarr had concluded that the Jovians were hiding weakness behind a cloak of mystery and a few minor technological advances. Consequently, in AD 23,216, the Amarr sent a fleet of 200 warships to a system they call Vac Atia, a French holding of the Jove Empire, where the Amarr intended to crush the Jovian presence and begin a new campaign of conquest. The Amarr had not been shy about the matter of their intention, and all their propaganda for weeks past had made it clear they intended to act against the Jove. For their part, the Jovians had made sure to infiltrate the highest level of the Amarr government and military. When the Amarr entered in Vac Tio, the Jovians were waiting. The ensuing Battle of Vac Actiot was notable in several ways. It was the first defeat, and a crushing one at that, of an Amarr fleet by another race. It was the first and the last time that the Jovians engaged in a battle with another race, at least so far as the other race knew, and it was the first and the last time that a Jovian mothership was seen in battle. The Amarr reaction to their defeat was to prepare a second, larger fleet to attack the Jovians. At this time, as news of the first Amarr fleet's defeat spread throughout the empire, the Minmatar resistance sent the signal to their people to rise up against the Amarr. Faced by a large, well-equipped rebellion and multiple wars, the Amarr had no choice but to sue for peace with the Jovians and see to the flames spreading across their empire. The Great Rebellion made fantastic gains in these first days. The Amarr occupation of Matar was swift, and those Amarr unable to flee the planet found as little mercy at the end of the materie as they had shown their erstwhile slaves. The Amarr occupation fleet was driven out of Pathor in some disarray. The shock of the defeat of Baltatiotes seemingly deeply demoralizing the Amarr military. This pattern was repeated in most of the systems previously controlled by the old Minmatar Empire. The Amarr only stabilized the situation in the end by establishing and massively bolstering the Amarr Mandate, a puppet state nominally ruled by the Nefantar, a Minmatar tribe that had always collaborated with the Amarr and fled with them from the weight of the free tribes during the rebellion. By this time, the Freematary had consolidated their hold over a considerable number of systems, giving them a firm base on which to establish a new nation, the Minmatar Republic. The early Republic. With the aid of the Galante Federation, the free Minmatar rapidly established their new nation-state as a parliamentary republic. The Minmatar Republic's first concern was the security of its new borders, and the second was to develop a self-sustaining industrial base. The new republic willingly participated in the Concord Assembly when it was founded in AD 23,233, even if it meant entering into diplomacy with the hated Amarr. They also took part in the UEO conference and adopted the new standard time and calendar of New Eden. The Minmatar tribe accepted that much of the management of the new republic would have to be overseen by the Republic Parliament and its agency. Gallantry aid was essential in these early days, and federation notions of democracy were accepted without too much scrutiny. To many Minmatar, they were a breath of fresh air after the horrors of the Amarr occupation. Even so, some Minmatar were not so sure about the Republic, and the Tucker tribe decided they wanted no part of it, choosing to take their spacefaring caravans to the Great Wildlands region. Others could not adjust to civil society and democratic politics, variously carrying on the fight against the Amarr as terrorists, joining criminal cartels, or taking themselves into space as wanderers. Many Minmatar, on the other hand, were very taken with Gallantry ideals and chose to migrate to the Federation rather than help build a new Minmatar society. Over time, more and more Minmatar took this path, with the effect that Gallantry influence over the Republic as a whole won. Resentment of those who had left the Minmatar Republic became common, and those more and more of Gallantry ways tend to be among those emigrating to the Federation. By YC 110, the Minmatar Republic had started to undergo a tribal renaissance, as the tribal heritage and culture of the Minmatar increasingly influenced the society and politics of the Republic. Wow, that was so interesting. The Jove were such badasses. Oh, wait. I cannot finish my first episode of the Minmatar series talking about Jove. Let me redo it. Thanks guys for listening. I hope you like it, and please follow me and hit the bell to be advised of my new episode. The Minmatar looks like to have so little wonderful days before the nightmare of being slave of the Amarr. I wonder how they managed to find their own identity after that. I wonder if you noticed, but the only one who didn't take place in the conflict was the cavalry. That's definitely their attitude. They don't want to get involved into conflicts that doesn't concern them directly. And they also were at war with the Gallantry. It was also a question of the Jovian mothership that no one's seen after the conflict. In Eve, right now, we are in YC 125, and we just discovered a structure full of Jovian technologies called the Fulcrum. Do you think we're gonna find the blueprint of this mothership in the Fulcrum? This is me again talking about the Jove. Sorry! So next week we're gonna talk about the tribe and what makes them so specific and unique. See you next week, Kenix and friends!